So I think there's a number of things going on that we want to think about as a clinician, but also as a parent. We don't want to focus too heavily on a diagnostic label and
Mhm,
miss the person
mhm,
and the beauty of who your child is and
mhm.
who my kids are. We don't want to ignore those areas of concern and those areas of strength and the areas that allow them to thrive. We want to take a strengths-based approach. We want to look at our values and how are we orienting around that. The benefit of any clear diagnosis is guiding a path. And I think often one of the benefits of that is that we can be thoughtful, patient in of our kids' needs when they need more time or they need added support.
Welcome, everybody, to the Four Peaks Parents Podcast with your host, Thomas Miller. Today is actually the 49th episode, which is super exciting. Thank you to everyone who's been a super fan from the jump and continues, of course, to support this podcast so that I can bring tips, tools, and strategies right to parents out there. I am so honored to have with me today Brandon Moffit, who is the founding partner of Black Mountain Academy and Intrepid Young Adults. Big shout out to Brandon for being here. Just want to give a little bit more info about who Brandon is. You're an OG in the game, right? You and me both. I think we've both got about 20. You might have me on 2 years or so, or a year. Been in this field as a dedicated and passionate clinical professional with expertise providing therapeutic and educational services to young people and their families for 25 plus years. You are deeply invested in the fields of education, clinical mental health, residential care, outdoor behavioral health. The list goes on. And of course, we'll give you a chance to talk more about Black Mountain Academy and Intrepid Young Adults. But the main reason Brandon is here is to talk about finding that like perfect balance of how to support, facilitate without hovering, micromanaging, contriving, such a challenging role. So thank you, Brandon, for being here. And if you just want to take it away a little bit with, what you've seen in terms of, the struggles for parents around, and as please speak to more about what you do and what your program's all about and how you see families flying maybe at the right and wrong altitude at times. So thank you so much again for being here.
Yeah, great. Thank you for having me. It's good to be a guest, and I love what you're doing on the podcast and bringing rich, meaningful resources to us as parents. I'm also a parent and have two
Hmm.
teenagers, and so I've been working with teenagers since my late teens, early 20s, and in more formal roles in the last 25 years. And I think that the things I think about and the things that I think we'll dive in today is the importance of partnering and having partners along the way. And I'm an educator, and spend the last 20 years as a therapist in that partnership with families and then members of the teams that I get to be a part of and that I'm on. And that work is really rich and meaningful, and being in a journey alongside of people is a tremendous honor. And it's also complex. In some ways, there's complexities that we're navigating now that are new, and they're new challenges
Hmm.
and rapidly evolving challenges. And I know there are a lot of themes in your podcast around some of those complexities. This idea of altitude, I think, is a fascinating one in the sense of where do we stand and where are we at, and the idea of uh, hovering too closely or missing moments that are really critical that your child wanted you and needed you to be right at their side, supporting them, coaching them. I loved the image that you used of being a lighthouse,
Mm,
not the captain,
mm,
and how obviously when our children are younger, we're really captaining. We're in that role. We're really helping guide and steer the ship. But as they grow toward adulthood and become emerging adults and move into the early stages of adulthood, I love the imagery of it, a lighthouse.
mm.
We are shining light into and on a path, and still respecting their agency and autonomy as a young adult. But even a young person in their later adolescence, the ability to do that is really important. So the work that I get to do and that
Mhm.
the teams that I'm on are doing is, again, it's rewarding, amazing. And love that I get to be here to talk a little bit about that and have this conversation with you.
Yeah, well, and first off, thank you for referencing. You get three gold stars for referencing an earlier episode, and the title of that one came about because I realized I was basically sucking at that. So it was like the podcast was like, this is needed, I think, for the audience, but it's pretty much needed for me because I was totally trying to like grab the wheel of my 15-year-old's ship and trying way too much to direct. One of the things that I'd love for you to talk about, and again, I know at and please correct me, at Black Mountain Academy or Intrepid Young Adults, you have many individual or diverse neurotypes, right? I really like that idea of neurotypes versus neurodivergent or non-neurodivergent or
Right.
neurotypical. So you do have a good percentage of young adults, teens or young adults in your program who are clinically diagnosed on the spectrum. And I think what can be challenging, I'd love to hear you speak about that, is once the family now has the diagnosis, I think sometimes what I see happening with a lot of families that I work with or coach over the years is they're like ChatGPT now, right? Or it used to be Wikipedia or be Google. And now it's like they have to know all this stuff and follow said script, right? And while there's great stuff in learning about, right, the tips and tools and strategies that make sense for said diagnosis. How do you see families trying to figure out again, okay, do I parent from this innate place versus do I parent from, again, this more clinical place? And again, speak of that altitude because you have people in your program, young adults and teens, and I think what happens sometimes for families, they get stuck, right? Not only in a diagnostic sort of response, but in also maybe a developmental response. How do you see families, avoiding some of those pitfalls?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that you're speaking to in regards to neurodiversity and neurotypes. And that is the specialization at Black Mountain Academy, which is a specialized boarding school here in North Carolina. And then Intrepid Young Adults is our young adult community that's in Asheville, pretty close to each campus. And so I think there's a number of things going on that we want to think about as a clinician, but also as a parent. We don't want to focus too heavily on a diagnostic label and
Hmm.
miss the person and the beauty of who your child is and
Hmm.
who my kids are. We don't want to ignore those areas of concern and those areas of strength and the areas that allow them to thrive. We want to take a strengths-based approach. We want to look at our values and how are we orienting around that. The benefit of any clear diagnosis is guiding a path. And I think often one of the benefits of that is that we can be thoughtful, patient, and of our kids' needs when they need more time or they need added support.
One of the things too I'd love to hear about is, that we talked about a little bit about altitude. We talked a little bit about on our call, preparing for this is sort of like letting go, failing forward. Yeah, that could be really hard though, right, for parents, particularly if, they've played these roles that we can talk about maybe on this episode about what does it mean to be supportive versus infantilize. What do you see or what advice do you give for families and when to kind of let go, when to swoop in? How do they find that like just right, perfect Goldilocks, balance, if it even exists, right? How would you coach a family to figure that out, particularly with a neurodivergent young adult who might be stepping out big time out of their comfort zones?
Yeah, I think great question. And I think I love the idea that you use in your regular reference around failing forward. And there are times where we want to be close at hand if that failing could be more impactful to multiple areas of our child's life. And it's not about hovering, but it's about being there to protect and catch and coach and support. And then there's other times where that failure is going to be quote unquote a little f failure. It's not
Hmm. Hmm.
catastrophic. It's not going to be overly damaging to
Hmm.
their academic trajectory. It's not going to be overly damaging to their social life. And that ability to know when to step back and allow for, and again, adjust. I don't
Mhm.
think there is a perfect strategy in that, perfect Goldilocks reference you made, in that most of the individuals that I have the privilege to work with and that we get to work with, and their families, their development is asynchronous.
Mm.
There are some phenomenal, sometimes untapped, often really apparent to us, strengths and capability and skills that are we want to hone in on, and we want to set the pace for success
Mm.
and use for those to kind of manifest and have time, space, and our energy. And
Mhm.
that's not a time to hover. That's a time to set up for success and then
Mhm.
watch it fly. Uh,
Mhm.
there's times where, similarly, in that asynchronous approach, where we're looking at an area that's much more challenging, and that could be social, it could be sensory, it could be the fast pace of life that we all live, and just needing more time to process and utilize and integrate information. And so we want to be adjusting in and being accommodating with a goal of moving out of those accommodations over time, or moving away
Mm.
from, or at least having less of them over time. So I think it's a really dynamic and not perfect approach.
Mhm.
This is that part around partnering that I mentioned earlier. I believe that the more partners we have around our children and around us as parents, it allows us to see our blind spots,
Mhm.
notice the things that they're doing really well. I know in my own kids' lives, I've had other adults who are teachers, or get to be with them or spend time with them in other ways where I'm not there, and they speak to some really neat things that I might not see in the
Mhm.
context of my own role
Mhm.
as a parent. Even though I'm sometimes in those same contexts, other times I'm stepping away. They're in the care and the guidance of these amazing adults, and they're going to speak to things that I don't, and they're going to reinforce or build on. And that ability to have those partners
Yep.
alongside of myself as a parent, and my partner as a co-parent, and both of my children, is part of what allows me to feel like we're doing that balance. I think sometimes there's this messaging that I know that you navigate as a coach and a therapist to parents, of I need to have all of the skills, and I need
Mhm.
to do everything, and I need
Mhm.
to be good at all of those.
Mhm.
And I think that's an unnecessary and a burden that
Yeah.
parents carry. So I don't think there's a perfect piece. I do think it's about attunement with your child. I think it's about having other really committed, caring, invested, and skilled adults in their life in different contexts. And then there's that ability to start, especially as they grow older, to zoom out and then zoom back in, and then zoom out at these moments where we know they're going to do well, and then come back in a little bit more closely when they need some, more intensive care, coaching, support, reassurance.
Mhm.
Is
Mhm.
an approach that I think a lot about.
Yeah, it's funny, the message of you don't have to be perfect, I think is such a positive one, because so many families, I'm sure you see this as well, they all have big shame sticks, right, that are like right next to them, and they'll just like whoosh, hit themselves every day, almost, it feels like, because they are putting so much pressure on themselves. And as a parent, of course, it's like the proud parent of bumper sticker. We all fall into that at times, identifying, particularly on our child's outcome or our child's metric or rubric or some arbitrary Kool-Aid thing that we may have drank. And I love that piece around, allowing other, let's say, mirrors to create a reflection for our child, whether that's a healthy teacher or a coach or whoever, a chaplain or just an aunt and uncle. It's so important because we can't see ourselves and we definitely can't see our kids. And even though I think so many of us, of course, are very positive in nature when we think about our kids, we still, have all the dirt and have all the, the frustration and the rust that when you're sitting at your child's IEP meeting or sitting at a, whatever meeting, parent teacher, and the teacher's like, did you know that so and so, immediately I think a lot of parents feel guilty, like, oh,
Yeah.
I didn't think of that, I didn't know that. And again, if we can turn that narrative the way you're describing, which is great, into like, I am actually, in fact, more efficacious or right or effective or better as a mom or dad because I didn't know these things and I created that space for someone else, right, to know these things or my child to self advocate. Use the word agency before, I think that's really important. And then the piece around even just think about, teens or young adults being where your program is located in North Carolina. That in of itself, right, isn't a geographic cure, but that's a massive, right, transition. And as we know, not just, of course, kids on the spectrum, but kids in general struggle with transitions, particularly if there's anxiety there and there's a lot of anticipatory anxiety. How do you even manage just the dosage there in terms of helping families to figure out what do we got? What should you got? What's your role? What's our role? I'm sure that is a consummate, as you said, not perfect, sloppy, dirty, individualized, and beautiful process.
It is. It's largely beautiful and rewarding, and it can be messy because the nature of these things. There's not an exact path for any particular child or any particular family. Earlier today, I was leading one of our peer support calls, and we were talking about a lead up to the holidays. What do we enjoy?
Hmm.
The traditions that we hold? What are the ones that are harder for our child? And really talking through that. And one of our families that was there, their child's been here about a year, is on the cusp of transition, and had a lot of just wisdom of pacing,
Hmm.
trusting guidance, and trusting. Uh,
Hmm.
partnering with our team in that
Hmm.
we wanted more, but our child wasn't quite ready
Hmm.
so we have smaller visits, and we did
Hmm.
things to help those transitions start well and go well. And so it's really, again, kind of an attending to and an attunement with our each of our children. I know for both of my own kids, my parenting style, I have to adjust, is a very different one for my son who's the oldest child, and my daughter. And I have to make a tremendous amount of adjustments
Hmm.
to the needs of their personality, the way they learn, the things they like, the things they dislike, and those adjustments keep us on our feet as parents. And I think the caring, intentional, committed parent can be at risk of support in the hovering that you're talking
Hmm.
about.
Hmm.
Talked a little bit about how to distinguish support from, you didn't use the word enabling, but getting to that point where that support
Sure.
is no longer needed, but it's continues, and then it
Sure.
is to the advantage of the child. Again, I think it's really nuanced. And I think when I think of transition, to your question about transition, um, we want to set everyone up for success, not only our teams, but when we think of as a therapist guiding families in the work that you're doing, we want to pace ourselves. So part of our call today in anticipating the joys and the stressors of holidays, you're talking about how to take care of ourselves. What do you need to step into the joy and to account for and plan for those stressors? Is a walk each day during the time you're together a way for you to help? What helps your child to ask them and to process that ahead of time, give them some time to really think about it. Where can part of that agency is where can we, um, you know, from a place of curiosity with your child,
Mm.
and we're often coaching them to ask your kid what works. They may
Mhm.
not know, and they may say, "I don't know," and
Mhm.
it's a way to give them some agency to speak in their own behalf, and then become their own self advocate over time. That's a skill to learn. It's not something that's in
Mhm.
because they're
Mhm.
a teenager.
Mhm.
Um, they
Mhm.
want to speak up in their own behalf.
Mhm.
Skill is unrefined, and so we want to teach them. We want to
Mhm.
give them opportunity, low stakes opportunities to
Mhm.
try and to struggle and to fail, and low stakes opportunities to
Mhm.
knock it out of the park. And,
Yeah.
and then over time, they're getting more of those and more time. So when I think of transition, or I think of stressors or things that can be hard for a person who has a learning disability, who's on the spectrum, or that just transitions are stressful because so much is going on and we live
Sure.
in such a fast paced culture, slow it down. We all benefit from being a little more methodical, taking a little bit more time, giving a little bit more space. Those can do wonders not only for the frontal lobe to catch
Mhm.
up
Mhm.
from the rational brain, not just the emotional brain. I'm
Mhm.
saying that as a parent, not just what I want my child to
Sure.
experience,
Sure.
thinking the rational versus emotional brain. So I think there's a couple things I ponder or reflect on with our families, and that our team works to provide. Um, and we're not in a culture that is slowing down.
No.
And even more of a reason for
Yeah.
us ways to do that.
There's so much brilliance in what you just said, and obviously it speaks to why you're so good and your team is so good and your program is so good, right? At helping young adults and teens. The piece I heard in there, which is so huge, is being curious, right? Asking those questions, and even an I don't know. I think an I don't know is hard for families, right? And you talk about that slowing. I always say STFD, slow the fudge down. You could There's another F word in there you could use as well. So slow the fudge down. That idea of also suspending disbelief. I think so often families want to project onto that I don't know. And now trust me, if you have a teenager, whatever whatever the deal is, you're going to hear a litany of I don't knows, right? Let's be real. Like half the time I don't know means get the heck away from me. Sometimes it means I truly don't know. Sometimes it means like this is horrible timing. Sometimes it means I don't know. I need more time. I like that piece around being curious, asking open-ended questions, slowing things down, letting things kind of gestate. And I think what's so hard, you talk about even your two kids, and they're 4 years apart, right? Or four?
Yeah, for
4 years apart, two different genders. They're in the same car at the same time, and you have to code switch and toggle and be like, okay, right, who am I talking to? And obviously, your job, helps you pivot in your career, with so many diverse neurotypes that you're working with every day. That being said, it's hard not to now project and want to solve, want to fix, want to even just close that agenda down. I'm guilty of. I was talking about this in the last episode. I'm actually very good. I'll give myself a positive shout out. I'm fantastic at when my kids try to put me on their time. When they're like, can I go to this sleepover thing, or can I go da 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 da, or can you drop me off right now to the mall? Da, da, da. I'm really good at being like, whoa, like, okay, cool. Like, wow, this feels urgent to you. Like, okay, but and giving myself time. But then I'm very guilty of not giving my kids time, you know, where I'm egocentric and I want to know the answer of what the hell the weekend looks like. So I'm trying to already think about, can I get, 2 minutes of self-care in there, or whatever the heck it is, or financially, or whatever that is. So that's just that piece around like synergy, is never going to happen exactly, right? We're never going to be syntonic, or use the word asynchronous. It's so true that we're always like in a different place, right, than our children. And we have to accept that. But I do agree with you that slowing things down, dropping those shoulders, taking that breath, right, allows for that pause. And there's, as you know, right, there's always a space between impulse and action, right, or between trigger and response. And the more we can expand that space, right, the more regulated we are, and we're going to be more, like you said, PFC, prefrontal cortex, in our response. We know. Oh my God, I was just talking to someone about cannabis, and that's not what we're talking about today. But there's so many things, like you said, our society is getting faster. Our society is getting more and more disconnected. Right? We're getting more and more VL'd. We're getting more and more AI. We're getting more and more everything. So for us to be regulated, not perfectly, but better. What is kind of a real trap that you see that maybe you didn't see, maybe trap, pitfall, whatever you want to call it, challenge that you see? And again, they could be neurodiverse or not, just the parent young adult dynamic. What's something new that is definitely a bigger deal, or something more nuanced than what it used to be?
Yeah, I think parents are facing a few challenges. I'm talking about the pace of things, and anything we can do to slow ourselves down is a gift we give our kids.
Hmm.
And there's small ways to do that. And when I think of transitions can often move quickly, and we
Hmm.
just do it, and then it either goes well or it doesn't. And sometimes when it doesn't go well, it goes really poorly. And so I think the slowing down and us um, in kind of counterbalancing the pace of information, the pace of overwhelm, the pace of noise.
Mm,
We as a culture have so many things that we're from stimulus viewpoint that is going on all the time at any point, and it's in our pocket. And so I think anything that we do to slow down helps us, helps our children. I think another thing that's going on, and I would suggest that this is more complex since the pandemic, but I think it carries even 5.5 years out, is decision fatigue for parents is very
mm,
real.
mm,
A lot of choices, and there are a lot of things that are based in really good research and really good information. Uh,
mhm.
we're almost saturated in a lot, and then there's the challenge of sorting out what information is most accurate. Where do I ground myself?
Sure, sure.
How do I decide? And I think a lot of families are, but what if it doesn't go well? What if I do this
Mhm,
and
mhm,
my child struggles for the next year,
mhm,
3 years,
mhm,
get almost too far ahead?
mhm,
Um, so much of our life and so much of our kids' lives, there is what looks like a curated, perfect
mhm, mhm,
one.
mhm.
And I think that's contributing to decision fatigue. When the pandemic first started, and I think some of us are had moved ourselves out of this, parents ended up being in a role in which they had to be the parent. They needed to make sure dinner was on the table. The day was happening. They needed to translate and do and support and tutor their child through school. They need to make sure their child was having
Mhm,
supervision because there was no longer
mhm,
a gap
mhm,
in math.
mhm,
They were facilitating social life
mhm.
that for some communities, some places went from every day to zero. And
Yeah,
so there's been this multiplicity of roles that parents had to assume to weather those moments. And I think that sometimes we are still taking on too many roles in our child's
sure,
life,
sure.
and we feel and see the social media version of the perfect
Yeah.
example of a parent who can also be the tutor, the coach, the the leader, whatever. Right?
Mhm,
We have
mhm.
a bit of pressure we are placing on ourselves that came out of a necessity and comes back to altitude, is putting us at a very close, hovering over the ground in a lot of areas of our
Sure,
child life.
sure.
And we need, that ability to have and to build strong communities around our kid is actually not only to their benefit because they know how to resource, they know how to go to other adults. I had a ceremony with my son around his 17th birthday this fall, and one of the people in that circle of that ceremony with him said, before my son stepped into the circle with us, any one of you as parents who know him, if he doesn't want to call his parents, he needs to be able to call you and not
Mm,
questions asked, and know that you're a safe person who's a resource and a support for him.
mm.
I'm like, that's a powerful message.
Yes.
Kids have access to and are leaning into and know who their community is, especially again as they approach adulthood.
Mhm,
It's a lot of work to build. If your
mhm.
child has social challenges as a result of anxiety, ADHD, being on the spectrum, that network of community that is with them at
Sure.
school, out of school is harder to build. So think of slowing down. I think of being clear about the role that we're going to be really good in and the roles
Mhm.
we need support. Um, and I think, and not assuming we have to be good at all of those different
Right, right.
expected that where I think we also in our culture create this messaging. If your kid's successful and doing really well, that is a reflection of who you are as a person.
Mhm,
It
mhm.
is very attached to. And I certainly don't want to dismiss that I'm investing in my kids' lives. I'm
Sure,
investing in other families' children's
sure,
lives.
sure,
And then there's meaning in that, and that's important.
sure.
But the opposite of that is also true if that's the belief system, which is if my kid's failing, that I'm failing,
Right.
and we lose objectivity. I can be pretty objective and am a very objective therapist, director of a school, um, in a way that I'm not able to be with my kids when I walk in the door and they're walking in the door from school because I'm in it with them. I'm on the field. I'm not off the field. I
Mhm.
can coach, I can guide. And so anything that allows us to also find objectivity because otherwise we don't see our blind spots.
Yes.
And so if it's a therapist, it's a coach, it's someone guiding us, it's another parent whose kids are now in college while I'm getting my kids through high school says, hey,
Mhm.
this is something we did. Anytime we have those other people, those other, again, partners, other people are invested in our kids' well-being, it goes a long way in relief to us about riding the highs and the lows that our kids are,
Mhm.
but it also gives us a chance to have the support we need when it does get hard, when it is
Yes.
a stretch or difficult.
So I'm going to keep my shame stick down, and not hit myself, because when you mentioned ritual, I immediately had this sense of like respect, awe, guilt, all rolled into one, because I was like, I haven't done that for my kids, and I missed my days of being in the woods and, wilderness therapy. We had such great rituals, and rituals are missing. And what I'm going to take from that, which I'm going to do a better job of, is making sure that I think I have done okay, but impressing upon my kids this idea of these people, right, are protective factors, and that it's actually an extension of my love. It's an extension of, right, my attachment, my connectedness, my togetherness with you, that I've, again, whether I've created them or they've shown up, my kid's soccer coach, this, that. I really love that. I love that. I also hear, which is so important, is that idea of you don't have to be everything, right, to everybody. And whether that was baked in COVID, as you know, you've been doing this way longer than COVID, as have I. And so those families that we've worked with for years that are undifferentiated, and that's what I hear in COVID, is COVID forced us to wear all these hats. And I think if the families, and I do this all the time with families, I'm always like, I think you just put on the sober coach hat, or oh, I think that was just a psychiatrist, or I heard the cheerleader in there, or I heard the micromanager, or the warden, or the recovery police. I used to literally in my office way back when have all these weird hats, and then I would like put them on, have parents put them on, like a captain's hat, and then a baseball hat, and then like a fireman's hat. And that can be so hard to bequeath those roles when they were baked in maybe necessity, whether it was COVID, or even I think of a woman who I worked with a little while ago who Narcaned her son like 7 times, right?
Right.
You got PTSD now, lady. There's no toothpaste going back in that tube. And then how do you, with a fatal brain disease, if we're talking about addiction, or if we're talking about neurodivergence or anxiety or depression where there was suicidality or self-injurious behavior, it's so hard. That's why it's the hardest freaking job in the world. But what I hear is, what a sign of love, self-love, and actually love for your child, and prudence and brilliance, to make sure there are folks, right, in your kid's life that can be signposts and mentors and guides. And I mean, when you were talking, it's like my shoulders don't go up, they just drop, right? Like, oh, to know that my kids are somewhat held, and it takes a village. That's such an old school, basic and free approach, right? Which I think is missing, right? And especially for your population, like you said, that where there is neurodiversity issues, or challenges, additional challenges, we should say. Yeah, they might be a little bit more, right, merged, but that's not adaptive, because, like you said, there are negative compound effects down the line, right?
Right.
There's so much more. Yeah.
Your compound effects to not only your child having that sense of community or those other caring, invested, attached adults or guides or mentors or coaches. Um, that's a resource for us. The
Hmm.
no shame stick needed. I wouldn't have done a ceremony with my son at 17 had two mentors that I have appreciated their mentorship in my life and at this stage of my life that I've crossed paths with in the last 3 years. Uh,
Hmm.
and they've kind of joined in my community of guiding and supporting parents. And it was their idea.
Hmm.
I when they brought it up a year and a half ago about
Hmm.
I felt the shake stick, and I'm like, oh wait,
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
do this. We can do this.
Totally.
Honor my son's approach to adulthood. When I think about who he is, and it was a really neat gathering of community around him, and it was and he had some time. So I think there's a way. You said it seems a little old school when I think it takes a village, but there's a reason that way of living, uh,
Sure.
our species survive and bring
Mhm.
kids to adulthood really well and thoughtfully. And again, I don't want to say this too many times, but there's a part of when you say your shoulders drops, like the pause to give ourselves
Mm.
space to try and also fail forward as parents,
Mhm.
and then to have someone there that's like, "Hey, we got this. We're gonna do this. We're gonna get your child
Mhm.
moment."
Mhm.
I've had some other people speak into my own children's life, and my heart in this work is to be able to speak into the families and the parents that we work with about the amazing qualities, the amazing person in their child, while doing the hard work to make sure they're navigating these things,
Mhm.
are the challenges in front of in
Sure.
front of them. And the people who've done that or are doing that with my kids are such a gift. And so it's a lot of work to nurture that, but
Mhm.
the compounding effect of having all of those people in their lives, but also in my life and my partner's life as we do this journey. I've never raised a 17-year-old, and I've been working with
Mhm.
17-year-olds since I was about 19.
Me too. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And so,
It's so funny. I remember one of my first therapists, supervisors being like, it'll be all different. It'll be so different when you have a kid. I was like, no, it won't. Like, I'm like, I know what I'm doing, right? Professionally, it's like so funny. And then when you're in it, it's night and day. One of the things I love that you said is like the what if, and I must hear that at least every day is what if, right? You said, what if this doesn't work? And I think again, I know where that comes from because again, they're scared, they're afraid, right? They love their child. They don't want to see their child get hurt or be diminished. And I heard you even talk about, well, if I don't follow the exact Pinterest, approach or take this path, and you talked about, did you say analysis paralysis? What was the term you used? Decision.
decision fatigue.
Yeah, same thing, right? Yeah, totally. And I think about, of course, I'm not going to lie, when families jump on a discovery call, I do believe there's a clear ROI to a family working with me across 90 days, getting 24 sessions, watching 23 videos, doing an 82 slide workbook. There is a real positive ROI to that. There is a cost of inaction if they don't work with me. Do I think that their child and them are doomed for life? No. However, I think it frees families up to realize that there are many opportunities for right intervention, for contact. There are many moments to create corrective emotional experiences there. So I think that's really liberating. I like that there isn't one clear path. I think obviously your program is super, effective and beneficial and helps to launch and provide social, emotional, financial, right, life skills for your students, which is vital. But that idea of like, I'm going to hunker down, get really tight, and then have that decision fatigue or analysis paralysis, I think it's very liberating if families could be okay with the fact that, you know what, there are good and bad programs. I would agree with that. There are helpful and unhelpful parenting coaches. There are clinically, effective versus less clinically effective approaches. But everything isn't the end all and be all, right? And I don't have to be paralyzed and poop a diamond, as I call it. I have some poop a diamond parents, as I say. They're so tight that, they don't have the gift of command. And think about that's being projected all over your child too, right? If you're
Yeah.
so scarcity mindset or anxiety based in every decision, that's going to affect them and really take them out of that equation. And you go back to what you said earlier about be curious, ask open-ended questions, engage them, right? And especially when you're dealing with it with an older adult. So just to because I got so much from this, I love the idea of the village. I love the idea of helping put protective factors around your kids. I love the idea of curiosity. I love the idea of we got to catch those what ifs on the negative side, right? And kind of liberate
Right.
and choose a choice. What would you say is two or three things? And then please talk a little bit more about how folks can find out about you and the great programs that you're leading.
Yeah, a couple of things. I really love Dr. Brene Brown's work that she's just published called Strong Ground. It is
Mm-hmm.
not a parenting book. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
However, coming out of her Dare to Lead work and
Mm-hmm.
this idea of grounding ourselves is often in the conversations I'm having with parents, when there's disagreement or discord with their child, or they're co-parenting and there's disagreement. It's like, what values do we hold, and
Mm-hmm.
how do those values keep us grounded and keep us focused? We may disagree
Mm-hmm.
about something that's maybe inconsequential in the
Mm-hmm.
long run, but feels really important right now because there's so much emotion attached. Talk
Mm-hmm.
about fear of the what if. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of anxiety for parents. There's a lot of what ifs. There's uh, at any given moment, at this point, but I wouldn't have been able to do this 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I could research what I think is going on with my kid. And in
Mm-hmm.
some ways that information could be beneficial, but without the right coach or support
Sure.
around
Sure.
information, it can be a cascade of fear and
Sure.
anxiety.
Sure.
And that anxiety is informing how you show up for your kid. And so I think that having that strong ground, um, and sort of centering at your core, when you talk about your shoulders drop, there's a little bit of like settling into the
Sure.
ground at your feet and where you're at, and how important it is for us to be able to do that and to do that for others, other parents, other people in our community. I think there's a lot we could tie in from, again, other themes in the conversations you've been having on your podcast. 49, congrats, that's a big deal. Uh, 50 podcasts.
Yeah.
But I do think it comes down to, when I think of those values and centering ourselves in that, we there's a lot of pressure. Adam Grant talks about the importance of asking our children. We often ask, "What are you going to do when you grow up?"
Mm-hmm.
And he said we should recenter ourselves on some level around, who are you becoming?
Mm-hmm.
Who do you want to be? Which is
Mm-hmm.
more values oriented versus
Mm-hmm.
your value is found in the work
Mhm,
through your production as a person,
mhm,
where you're
mhm,
putting the economy of what you give and take from the economy,
mhm,
or about who am I becoming. And so I think helping
mhm.
kids center themselves and who they're becoming, who they
I
want to
love
be.
that. I'm
What,
writing that down. I'm writing that down. I'm stealing that. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, Adam Grant.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that ability to center ourselves into the values we have as parents, and also helping our child do that, especially as they're approaching adulthood, them centering in who they want to be, and who keeps them at their best self, is going to be emulated and reflected not only about their strengths and the things that they love and get a lot of joy from, but it is going to be about the values they hold. And it allows us, when we think of value, it puts value on who they are versus what they do.
Sure. I love that.
And I think of the moments, again, there's a bit of a both ends of this, when they're doing well, and the doing of is good, positive things that
Sure.
we done to great to champion them. But when we focus on the doing, and it becomes scary, or it's dangerous, or it's not great, or it's not a reflection of who we are or who we want them to be, as in, that can be a tremendous burden for your child to carry, and it can quickly become shame for them
Absolutely.
as a family. So
Awesome.
those are other things I'm thinking about. You asked about what we do. So I'm at Black Mountain Academy, which is a specialized boarding school. We're in North Carolina, and we work with high school adolescent boys, often on the autism spectrum, but not always, and care a lot about them having a high quality experience where we're doing what you and I've been talking about. They have a sense of community. They're out in the community every day. They're active. They're engaging, and we're moving them along the way toward all of these functional skill sets that serve them for success in their life. But with this orientation around who they are at their best, who they want to be,
Mhm.
what they care about, what their values are. And then we have a young adult program in Asheville called Intrepid Young Adults. And in a similar way, we're stepping into a alongside of them in the sense of a coach. We're here to mentor, we're here to
Mhm.
coach, we're here to guide, we're here to teach what independence is, and given a lot of opportunities to do that. It's a amazing work. It's really rewarding. I feel humbled to be in this path with
Mhm.
people that we get to serve, and the families we join and partner with along the way. So it's exciting work, and getting glad to be a part of a conversation to think about how we do this as a culture, and how we equip parents to feel good enough in the work they're doing, and feel skilled, and know that there's resources out there to guide their children to feeling whole and living lives that are full and thriving.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough. I want folks obviously to know how to get in touch with you. So it's just shout out your resume. I mean your website. Sorry, what's the best
Yeah,
way?
so theblackmountainacademy.com
Awesome.
and intrepidyoungadults.com, and my
Awesome.
contact information is in both of those. And thanks for having me. I love these conversations. Love listening to your podcast.
Sure.
And
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I took notes. I got so much from it. And also I always end with, for any parent out there who definitely, feels like they're running, being ran over, if you will, by their kids' mental health, addiction, learning challenges, feel free to go to fourpeaksparents.com. There's a free newsletter that will give you tips, tools, and strategies right to your inbox. There's obviously all the episodes, previous episodes in this podcast. If you feel like it would be beneficial to jump on a discovery call and explore more about Four Peaks Parents program with me, you could do that. You can easily book a free discovery call, and we can take it from there and see whether or not the program's a right fit to help you and your loved one and or your partner. If you're co-parenting, step on a pathway to wellness and immediately know how to create a positive shift. Thank you so much, Brandon. Thank you, everybody. And I'll see you in the 50th episode. Have a
thank you.
great time. Yeah. Thank you so much. Take care. Be well. Bye.
Yep, you too.